Hi everyone, I'm Jesse Lynn.
And I'm Angela Lynn. Welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? Happy holiday season, y'all. If you haven't noticed, I don't think we coordinated this, but Jesse and I are both wearing red and his background color is green. So you're like literally Christmas right now.
I
Oh, you
actually did do that.
purposely
I
did
did that on
this.
purpose. Yeah, I
Oh,
did that
good
on
for you.
purpose.
I
Yeah.
didn't wear this on purpose, but I'm happy we have a little holiday moment. So, because of the holidays, we are doing a mini around gift giving in terms of how it's different in Asian culture compared to in Western culture. And today we're going to be talking about how in Asian culture, of course, people also can give out of gratitude and like a personal connection to somebody, but there are a lot of instances where gifts are being given out of kind of like formality or expectation, and there are restrictions and kind of rules about how you're supposed to both give and receive. So that's what we're jumping into today.
You already touched upon the first thing that when you receive a gift in Asian culture, you're supposed to refuse the gift like a couple of times before you begrudgingly accept it. And it's kind of this like fun charades game because eventually you'll have given a gift to basically everyone and they will have given a gift back to you. But every time you have to pretend and be all like, no, like you can't do this. Like it's such an imposition. You don't need to do this. Like, I don't want your gift. And you kind of do that like this like little show like back and forth until finally you're like, okay, like I will politely accept your gift and you will receive a gift from me next time.
How many times is your normal kind of like back and forth?
Usually when I get gifts from other people, like family members, my parents are there. So I will do like two refusals and then I'll look at my mom and I'll
Oh
be
my God,
like,
that's a hilarious.
is this
Is that
okay?
enough?
I'll
Is
be like,
that enough?
and I'm like,
Oh my
okay,
God.
here we go.
That's funny. What about, okay, so that's with family though. What about just like in general? Like if a friend or a coworker or something tried to give you a gift?
If it's a really close friend and they're just giving me like a random gift, I'm like, oh, like you really shouldn't have. Like, I'll still accept the gift because I think that it's a little bit different. Like, I feel like it's kind of rude to be like, I don't want your gift.
I feel like that's already like a key difference is that in the refusals or lack thereof are there for different reasons. Like I feel like in Asian culture, the refusal is often because you don't want to appear greedy or like too kind of like grabby. So then you're supposed to be kind of like courteous and like polite, be like, oh no, 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 I don't deserve this. And like also to kind of raise them up of like, oh wow, that's so gracious of you, blah, 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 you know versus like you just described in the kind of Western context, it is kind of rude to refuse a gift unless it's like so outlandish. I don't know. I'm trying to even think of an example where you would refuse a gift, but it's like you know that because in Western culture, usually a gift is because they've like spent some time to think about like, oh, I want to give them this thing because of XYZ, and I've like put this thought into what they might like. So then to refuse that is kind of like refusing this really heartfelt like intent, and that would hurt them more than just receiving it.
You can let me know if you feel otherwise, but I think there are like certain set holidays and occasions in what I've experienced in being with my parents about Asian world where you like must give a gift and it generally will be like this kind of thing versus I feel like with my friends for the most part most people don't expect to receive gifts for most occasions, I would say.
I mean, I think it depends on the relationship you have with someone. Like, I agree with you that like sometimes you do set out like, oh, we're just not gift people, or like we definitely are gift people, but like as like a general rule of thumb, I think, for example, like a Valentine's Day, it's pretty common that like if you're in a romantic relationship to expect some sort of gift giving. At least that's how the mainstream media portrays it, is that like everyone who's in a romantic relationship gives something to each other, like box of chocolates, some flowers, whatever it may be, right?
Well, I do give something for those occasions, but I think it's different because for the most part, what I tend to like to do with other people is to share like an experience with them. So it's like I don't give like
Exactly.
things to people
That's
usually,
still a
but
gift
like,
though.
is it?
Yeah. You still spent money on it. It's still something they're receiving.
I guess it is a gift, but the gift is not like an object.
Well, now we're kind of veering into like a world where I'm kind of rebutting our hypothesis of Western and Eastern culture being different because I'm on the same page as you. Like, that's actually how Ramona and I usually give gifts to each other as well as experiences because we don't like accumulating things necessarily. However, you mentioned that in Asian culture, it's often not only do you refuse, but there's also like a kind of reciprocal, or maybe you didn't mention this, but we were just talking about this in our like pre recording. But like, there's also often an expectation of I'm gonna reciprocate with something later because you gave me something. But when it comes to things like experiences, like a meal out, I do think that is where kind of Western culture might shift back into like similar to Asian culture because we go Dutch all the time in meals. Like if you're out with your friends and you have a meal and you usually split, right? You're like, oh, let's just like all throw in our credit cards or whatever, split even. But if like one of your friends, you go out with him or her to dinner and they're like, oh, I got you, like I'll get this one, then it's pretty
Okay.
like it's kind of it's not expected, but like you should get them the next time, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a thing, right, in
Yeah,
Western
yeah.
culture when it comes to a shared friend experience, maybe, and maybe
Hmm.
that's not seen traditionally as a gift, but it is still something you're spending money on that you have like given to your friend or whoever it is.
I guess it's still a gift, but the context is specific. So I don't know if I necessarily will reciprocate.
Yeah. I don't think Western people expect a reciprocal, you got me next time. I think that the person receiving will usually want to reciprocate. I don't know in Asian culture if you're supposed to expect a reciprocal gift. I think the burden's usually on the person receiving the gift that they feel a responsibility to reciprocate with a gift more than like, I'm giving you this gift so that I get a gift back. I don't think that's necessarily how Asian people operate either.
No, I don't think so, but I do feel like there is an expectation that if you receive a gift, you should be giving a gift to the person at some point in the future. Well, like I think red envelopes is a good example of this because as a younger person, you are expecting to receive the gift, but then when you get older, you're expected to give gifts to younger people. So there definitely is kind of this like give and take expectation where when you receive something, it's expected that you would like pass it on.
Because of how the culture has taught you
Hmm.
gift
Yeah.
giving is supposed to be. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And something, since we're on the topic about red envelopes, something we looked up, because, but I've heard this as well, is that when it comes to money giving, one of the etiquette things that you're supposed to do is if you're going to give money back, it's supposed to be of equal or higher value than what you received. And it's just kind of funny to me because I understand it kind of in principle, right? But for me, it just cheapens it a little bit because red envelopes, let's just be real, it's just money, but you just put it in a nice like package, but it's still just money. You gave money. So then it's kind of like, okay, if someone gave you money out of like kindness or whatever, and you just give it back to them, aren't you just kind of like canceling
Throwing it
out
back
that
in their
nice?
face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just doesn't, from a Western standpoint, right? I understand there's like
Yeah.
different things that feed into that thought process, but from my perspective, it's always been a funny thing to me to like wrap my head around when it comes to money as a gift.
It's a tricky position to be in to do that like one for one thing. And I think it also speaks to, at least for my experience, like there is a little bit of like saving face almost where you're like, I can be as magnanimous as you can. Like we're on the same level kind of situation. Like this happened to me once, but like I had a kind of like a family friend that's almost like family. Hadn't seen them in like forever, like they hadn't seen my mom in forever. And I think I told you this story before, but when we met up, like forever time had passed, but she gave me like a rent envelope that was like a couple of out, maybe like $1,000 or like a little bit more than that. And my parents were like, this is it's like ridiculous. And I was like, could we reciprocate? I could literally just give the money back, but like it also puts like a little bit of pressure onto like, how can we like
Mm,
give something that is of equal kind of like
yeah.
value in exchange. And that's why I think when that auntie sent her sons to come study here, my parents were like, "Oh, come live with us for
Oh my
like however long you
gosh.
want." Like,
Oh, yeah, you did mention that.
yeah.
Wow.
So there's definitely like pressure to try to like to offer something that is like equal value.
Okay, well, let's switch this a little bit. There's also other little etiquette points or like weird things that we want, or not weird, but like different from a Western versus Eastern context we wanted to talk about. Seniority is something that is like big in Asian culture, but it's like if I was in a American office setting, it just wouldn't be the same. One of the articles you sent me said like if you're gonna give gifts in an office setting, like you have to give the most senior person the gift first, and it should be the highest value gift of all the gifts, and you can't give the same gift to everyone in the office. Versus like in the US, I feel like it's very common, like if you are at all going to give gifts to anyone in the office, it's pretty common that everyone gets the same shit. What else was different from an etiquette standpoint that we want to highlight?
I think something that's also different is that, at least from what I've seen so far, my parents very rarely give like actual things to people. It's usually money. I think there were like a few situations where my mom actually purchased something for someone, but it was like wedding registry type thing, or was like the person was like, we need X. I will say that I think the key exception here, and maybe this is the other etiquette thing, is like how closely connected we are with that person. Because I do remember in some situations she didn't buy, like she didn't give the person cash. She just was like, oh, I remember this person said they wanted like this slippers or something, and she got them slippers. But I don't know if that's just like her changing her way of doing things after living in America and taking on a slightly Western approach, or like the actual etiquette of it. But yeah, usually it's money. And if it's not money and it's a physical thing, it will be something that like someone specifically asked for, or it's like something for someone that you don't really know that well, and but you just want to get them something that's like a little like nicety thing.
Okay, and then I think the last thing that's like kind of different is that there are taboos around like specific things you're not supposed to give. Some of them are like, okay, words. In a lot of Asian cultures, the words can sound very similar to other words. So then it's like, so 4 you mentioned is the unlucky number in a lot of Asian cultures. It's essentially the equivalent of 13 in Western culture. It's like unlucky because it sounds like death in whatever language it is. So you're not supposed to give things in 4s apparently. And then there's also like the umbrella thing, which I was like, oh, I had to like think about that a little bit, because in Chinese it's like shen. So I guess it's like you're like shattering. You give it, it means you're like trying to like shatter or like dissolve your friendship or relationship with that person. But I was like, who's gonna give an umbrella? It's bizarre. It's like, who's giving an umbrella as a gift? But something that I did recently learn, I mean, I think I read this before, but I recently learned it because I'm taking Japanese class while I'm here in Japan. And so there's all these like scenarios I read, and one of them is like a weird gift giving situation with flowers, where it's supposed to be some like Westerner who's like, oh, for someone's birthday I gave them flowers and everyone laughed at me. Why did that happen? And the friend was like, what kind of flower? Or he said like, I gave her a gift, and everyone started laughing. Why do you think this happened? And the guy was like, what was the gift? And he was like, it was flowers. And he was like, what kind of flowers? And he was like, chrysanthemums. And he was like, oh, chrysanthemums are specifically only bought to be put on graves at funerals. So that's like a specific thing I did learn here in Japan. But in the article you sent and read about the taboos, it apparently also just applies in general. So like white and yellow flowers, I guess, are like common funeral themed things. And so you're just not supposed to give those. Versus like in Western culture, I mean, I guess it would be strange if you gave just like a bouquet of white roses. But if your bouquet has like, you know, a couple white flowers in there, or like a singular chrysanthemum or whatever, like nobody's going to be like, ooh, like not supposed to give this. I don't think we have that kind of thing.
Yeah, I just think the significance of these things is not as universal, because you know the population here is not as monolithic as it is in Asia. So like I'm sure that there are certain, you know, in certain cultures, like there are certain things around what kinds of colors and things of that nature. But I think being in a country where there's so many different people mixed around, there's no expectation that somebody would outside of your culture, or maybe even inside of your culture, depending where they grew up, would know that?
Well, I think these were kind of like the key things, some of the key things that we saw that are kind of like pretty different or funny when
Interesting.
it, yeah,
Yeah.
interesting when you compare West versus East when it comes to the idea of gift giving. But we want to throw it back to you all listeners. Number one, have you experienced any of these types of things in your experiences with either family or friends from the motherland, or then you coming from Asia and coming into the US and having this kind of weird like expectations being different? Or do you have something else that was like an expectation taboo, something different that you heard or abide by that we did not cover? Because I'm sure this is just kind of like top most prominent things, but there's probably a bunch of other stuff in specific cultures that's like not okay or certain expectation. Let us know in the comments because it's always interesting to learn about other people's experiences. And don't come back next week because this is the last episode for a
It's
little
the
bit.
end of the year.
It is the end of the year. We hope you all have a very happy, healthy,
Cozy,
loving,
warm.
cozy holiday season and into the new year. We'll be back sometime in the new year. We need a break. We'll let you know when we're coming back. But until then, listen back on our old episodes, engage with us on social media, and just live your life, y'all.
Enjoy your life. Enjoy the holidays.
And until next year, 再见,
再见,
bitches.
bitches.